This is the Infrastructure Matters podcast, brought to you by the Futurum Group. We explore the latest developments in hybrid cloud computing and the technology that underpins it. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the latest trends and technologies that are shaping the hybrid cloud computing landscape. The Infrastructure Matters podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Please do not take anything reflected in this show as investment advice. Now your co-hosts, Steven Dickens, Camberley Bates, and Krista Maycumber of the Futurum Group.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Infrastructure Matters. You'll notice a different background and some different people on the show today.
Interlopers.
Interlopers, yes, we'll call them interlopers. So let's do some introductions. First off, to my left, we have Stephen Foskett.
Thank you for having me here on Infrastructure Matters. I would not dispute that statement, and I am the organizer of Tech Field Day here, now part of the Futurum Group.
And then the other guest on our show.
I'm Keith Townsend, formerly the president of the CTO advisor. Now I'm just like a head advisor here at Futurum Group.
Hanging out, chilling. Enjoying.
It's weird. I'm at a Tech Field Day. We'll get into what that is, but I'm at a Tech Field Day. I'm not a delegate. It's really strange.
So let's go there first. We're on the road at Tech Field Day. Fantastic first day of that. But maybe for some of Camberley's and I's core listeners, they don't know what Tech Field Day is. So, Steve, tell us what it is.
Sure. So Tech Field Day is something that I started 15 years ago where
15 years?
15, can you believe it? No kidding.
I know that because
I've known you that long. Oh
You've
my
known me
God.
way longer than that.
I know it's 15 years because 5 years ago there was a 10-year anniversary.
Yeah, and that was a big party.
It was a big party, great party.
So basically, a bunch of us who were speaking at events and getting champion, MVP, that kind of thing, and we were starting to get invited to things as blogger days, and because we were writing blogs and we're on Twitter, all that kind of stuff, and so we decided to organize our own. And so essentially, instead of having one company invite a bunch of people in, we invited the companies to present to us. And so over a couple of days, we would have 6 or 7 companies come in. They would present to us. We would ask questions. We would kind of attend as if it was a blogger day. And one of the things that we decided to do was to start live streaming and recording it and sharing those recordings. That became a real valuable thing in the industry because essentially now on YouTube, there's literally thousands and thousands of these videos of people like myself and Keith listening to presentations, watching demos, asking questions, engaging. Now that we're part of Futurum, it's pretty cool because essentially we get to have people like me and Keith, but also people like the two of you around the table, asking questions, engaging, interacting, sharing your thoughts, and it is all wide open for anybody to watch.
So you've been a long time delegate. That's not a phrase that I think makes sense straight away. Do you want to explain what being a delegate means, Keith? Because I wasn't aware until I came today what that, I was on the pre-brief calls, I was on the calls, I kind of heard the phrase, I'm like, okay. But maybe just explain what being a delegate means and what our role here is to represent the kind of end user community.
So I love it. Stephen tries to have at least one new delegate every event. It's tough, it's not always possible, but we had at least one new delegate for this event. Well, 3 new delegates.
Well, actually, if you count these two, we had 5.
Wow.
Which is absolutely incredible. I mean, it's been very rare that we've had that many new delegates. But it was funny, the first one, it was all new delegates.
That is how that works. Yeah. Yes. So my first Tech Field Day event was way back when, Storage Field Day 5, which was in 2014, I think.
Something like that.
Something like 2013, 2014. And I've now done 35 of these.
Wow.
Over the.
I didn't realize.
So what is it? Okay. So, but what is a delegate?
So I was just about to say I think the best way to describe a delegate is a independent influencer, whether they have a voice via their blog, website, social media, really doesn't matter, but they are somehow participating in the community. They can be an analyst, they can be a end user who's involved in the community groups, or like me, at large at the time, at large influencer who made money full time just talking tech. Extremely technical, like the two of you, able to digest this at a much lower level than a typical analyst. So think of an analyst day, and you're an analyst, but you're talking like deep technical concepts. You are the voice of the community of practitioners.
And I think that's the key point there. Ever since the very first one, I realized that the role of what we now would call influencers is not in that direction necessarily. It's actually kind of in the other direction. The delegates, the reason we call them delegates right from the very first event is because I realized that the people around that table, they represent the people who aren't around that table. Mm-hmm. They represent the people who want to get their questions answered and want to learn this stuff. And to me, that's the core of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that's come home from me today. We're the representatives of a broader, we're the kind of, I'm trying to embody it today of I'm asking questions from a group of people who maybe think like me, got skills like me, experience like me. My job on one of the, what are we, 12 today, is to ask those questions because I'm in the room, but I'm trying to think, I'm asking those questions from a bunch of people who are kind of where my head is at, trying to understand. So I'm in the room, and I mean, I've heard you ask a bunch of questions the same today, Camberley, from that storage mindset, because you represent that community really well.
Well, we've been doing this for quite some time and representing the IT and user community. So I think that it was kind of a natural flow for me and some of the questions that we had, because how our analyst group had operated, before we were part of Futurum. So I might object to your statement about the technical stuff, although I'm not quite the practitioner you were, that's for sure. But there's an element, and I think that we're bringing into the group that's both kind of like, how are you going to get to market? What's this pricing like? Is this going to get adopted? Where that stuff, and also that piece of it, the technical piece of it, the practicality of it. Is this really going to work for me? Kind of that I heard, and then I also heard some really kind of deep, some really deep kind of questions that were like, okay, so that's an interesting one to where that's going, in terms of, the integration piece of it, some of their. You could literally hear the pain point when they're talking, what they had bumped up against and where this hits on the pain point. So yeah.
So that's a good point. I really love the interplay between how both you and Steven take a very industry-wide look at the presentations. You talk to a lot of vendors, and you have, you've been briefed on the high level. And you came with some really great questions around where these solutions fit in the markets. And then hearing the practitioners come back and, a couple of the practitioners were really scratching their head like, I don't understand the problem that this solves. And as analysts, it's really easy to get wrapped up in kind of the high level talk track and not have that really low level context that some of the other delegates had of saying, you know what, this is a people problem being solved by a tool. And we heard a lot of that today.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that gives me a perfect segue. Thank you, Keith, as always. Great assist. Let's dive into some of the vendors that we've heard today. We had 3 vendors on the docket. Maybe let's start with, the agenda better than me. Who was up first? I'm a bit sort
NeuroBlade.
NeuroBlade, yes, the wonderful NeuroBlade. So I think coming up, this is Cloudfield Day 19, a particular set of requirements. I'd be keen to get your view. Maybe I'll add some color. Camberley, if you want to go first.
Yeah, and this gets back to what you were a little bit what you were just saying, is that we've seen the XPUs, DPUs, kind of things coming up over. Now, that group may not have seen as much of that come to market. We've also seen the DPUs come to market and just struggle to get to market for the same things that we are raising with them, which is, do you have what's the level of integration? What is going to take to get out there? Where's the route to market? Those kind of things that have struggled with those kind of folks getting out there. But then also seeing the light bulbs in the team and the delegates going off and saying, okay, so this is what this is doing. 30 times faster, that's unbelievable, which we would never, we have problems with those kind of numbers as well. Prove it to me, which is the same thing that we talk about. We've talked about. So I think it was a real well-rounded discussion. I think NeuroBlade, from my perception, has got something there, and they've addressed some of the big issues that are the barriers to market in terms of the integration problem and the systems.
Before we go much further, I'll just sort of, for the listeners who didn't.
Oh, I didn't even say what it was. I'm sorry. I didn't even say what it was.
So it's a SQL processing unit. These guys have developed custom silicon to insert into that SQL processing kind of thread or architecture to be able to accelerate that. So if you think of a graphics accelerator in your laptop, accelerates the graphics processing, this is the same sort of model, but comes in to accelerate those SQL queries. So custom silicon, working with a fab partner to create a card, literally kind of yay big, that goes into a server. What were your key takeaways, Keith?
So I couldn't help, and Steven's going to chuckle a little bit about this. I was listening to it on the way walking over. I didn't sit into the whole presentation, so I didn't catch the whole thing, but I got the gist of it, and it threw me back in mindset to this presenter back at the Storage Field Day 8 or something like that. And they also had a SQL accelerator. It was a kind of a driver that slipped into Windows. And they called it we labeled it the blackest of boxes. We didn't understand how the technology worked. And I really appreciated the time that NeuroBlade took to explain how the technology worked. I think, Camberley, I caught one of your questions on, is this basically preloading the stuff into memory and solving the RAM problem of an individual system? And, you kind of instantly get this, okay, pseudo in-memory database. I'm kind of creating an in-memory database using an accelerator card. So, while maybe not 30 times faster, again, we'd have to validate that, but the idea of it being significantly faster and worth the overhead, the operations overhead of deploying these things and making sure they're available. I didn't catch to see, how would this work in my VMware environment? It's invisible to VMware, et cetera. And those are the questions. I'll go back and watch the sessions because I'm sure the delegates asked these questions or they addressed them.
They did address the VMware and the container space, so yeah.
What were your takeaways, Steve?
Well, I was really impressed by them. I met them at FMS last year, and I was really impressed by what they're doing because it is so practical. Like Camberley was saying, the reason that I think some of these accelerator cards sometimes don't take off in the market is because they're kind of a solution in search of a problem, number one, and number two, because they're hard to actually make use of.
There's barriers to adoption, basically.
Big time.
And of course, those of us who've been in computing for a long time have seen this again and again. I mean, you get these, you get all these accelerators that are deployed, and if there's not an easy way to use them, then they're just not going to be used. Yeah. And so the thing that I like about NeuroBlade is that it really is transparent. It fits right into the SQL workflow. And again, a database application, it's going to be a higher level application than like storage or something like that, or even graphics or AI. And it makes it a little easier to slot it in there. They've got good software support. And what they're doing isn't really magic. It's the same kind of parallelization and pipelining that we do in a GPU, except that this has a very specific use case. And that specific use case is, SQL data applications, that are just too big to fit in memory, too big to ever fit in memory. It makes a lot of sense to me. I really like it.
And I think the other piece is that they're very focused on the data analytics space. So right now they're with Presto, which is a key application, and working on Spark. So they are in the core of some of those analytical analysis places going. And I'm actually kind of wondering, now that I'm thinking about it, since Spark is so prominent in the security industry and tracking that, I'm wondering if that's really a place that it can address the market in terms of the analysis of the database. I mean, we look at that's all that data coming in there for ransomware and what they're getting attacked to. That might be an incredible app for them.
And I have a suspicion that that's the kind of applications they're already being used in, because they couldn't really talk about their customers.
We can't talk about them.
And I don't blame them.
They're the three-letter people or something like that. It's kind of what they were doing.
Yeah, if you imagine the kind of people who need to accelerate, Presto and Spark and
the banks.
It's financial, it's intelligence.
People who are going to build.
They mentioned healthcare. They mentioned healthcare. I'm like, that seems like a throwaway. I'm like, financial
services.
Security.
They kept staying away from that as far as they could. And it's like, okay.
I think three of us asked the financial services question, and they managed to dodge it. So next on the docket was SoftIron. Really fast. I've been tracking those guys. I spoke to Phil Hall, their CEO, on one of our podcast channels 18 months ago. They've briefed me probably 3 or 4 times. Really interesting to watch a bunch of practitioners who are deeply invested in the kind of software stack, VMware, Kubernetes, platform engineering, kind of how you make this stuff work, listen and react to a platform that's completely rethought that from the ground up, from the silicon to the user interface, and not taking off-the-shelf pieces and parts and products and meshing them together. So it's fascinating because I was one step ahead of you guys because I'd seen it, and it was fascinating to kind of watch you guys go through the same reaction, like, how does that do? So maybe just react, if you will, to kind of what you saw from SoftIron.
Who do you want to start with?
We'll go with you because you're next to me.
I'm next to you. Okay, I'm glad. So I think the thing that there was a lot of light bulb moments with SoftIron with the crew, like you mentioned. Number one, that this isn't just another hyper-converged infrastructure stack, woohoo, right?
Because that's what it looks at the first time you see it. Like, I've seen one of these before. It's hyper-converged. 20 people have done that.
Yeah.
And then they get to charts 2, 3, 4, and it looks completely different.
That it's actually, it's a compelling, it scales way further than any hyper-converged stack does.
The answer to your question about scalability was the best reaction of the day. We'll come back to that, Camberley.
Yeah, and so that was one thing. Another thing was when the light bulb went off about why this is hardware plus software, and they're really, so this is hardware for people who can't buy off-the-shelf hardware due to security concerns and things like that. That was a big light bulb moment. I think another big light bulb moment was when people realized that this thing was originally designed in the ARM space. That they've been developing this thing and they've been enhancing it, and it wasn't. Again, it's not just, let's get a bunch of Dell servers and install some software on it and virtualize some stuff.
Well, okay, I'll take a piece of that. You do have the 3-letter companies, you do have the feds, you do have the DoD, all those kind of guys are buying Dell and HP servers. I mean, and they're also working on some big zero trust kind of capabilities very closely with those organizations. The difference here is that where I think the difference is they have taken it to another level of building. And that another level says in 2 areas. One, they're looking at each and every component that's in, whether or not it's a network node or a storage node or a server node, and say, what do I need specifically for my environment? This environment that we're building. Not a general purpose box, or even if I'm done, focused on. I mean, every one of the server guys will build a box that's specifically for analytics, or they're specifically for VM kind of stuff. But there's a level of generality to them because they're hitting a mass market. These guys are hitting a very specific market. They're built from the ground up, everything but the chips, and I presume that the solid state drives or something like that. Zero trust environment. It's not done in Taiwan. It's not done in some of the other places that everybody's concerned about doing. So you got that piece. And then they built their own software stack. Okay? And now you've got that entire thing integrated. There's a whole lot of questions that I still have. I mean, I could spend a day with them going through this architecture, like a good architectural white paper to talk about how does this thing scale, because they're talking about into the petabyte range in a single cluster.
Your reaction to when you asked the question about scalability, and you came back with
they said 16
petabytes.
Well,
your reaction was kind of like,
well, it's double digit.
400 questions just piled
Right.
to the
I mean,
front of your brain.
everybody in the group did, because we talked about, the issue that we talked about is that when you have hyper-converged systems, you've got blast radius problems and you have scale problems. And for the most part, most of those systems are going up to maybe 8, maybe 16 in that environment. And at that point, despite the fact that we've got maybe separate nodes that can scale out, and the Newtonics that scale out, and those kind of guys will talk about that, there's still scale issues, with the exception of probably one other piece of software that's out there, and that's PowerScale. So this is really an interesting, something I really want to get into farther, and understanding what they're doing and how they've been able to pull this off. And there's this unique piece that they have that's part of the network. It's part of the network nodes that is doing the control plane. It's like, okay, the network nodes are doing the control plane for the entire environment. That one took me for a loop.
I had a ton of questions.
And about 2 of them got answered.
And about 2 of them got answered.
Admittedly, we only had some time.
It's not that they want, we didn't have enough time. And
we are trying to get 90 minutes for 3 of us.
It's a lot more juice in this.
I would love for our labs team to get this in-house and tear it apart and understand it. I think the one thing that I was surprised at was delegate response. We've seen these cloud-in-a-box solutions for years, and they have not taken off. They just haven't. And it's not about the lack of features. It is about logistics and buying culture and operations. One of the delegates made a really great point about co-termination of VMware licenses with hardware.
Yeah.
That typically doesn't happen. Not only does it not happen, this is a different operating model for operating infrastructure within a enterprise IT shop. So the question is kind of, I made the comment in Slack that this is the thing that customers kind of think they want. Then when you show it to them, they get excited. And then when they go through the details of what it takes to implement it, wait, so how do I do, backup and recovery? How do I do replication? How do I do storage? Are my apps designed to take advantage of this? So, you talk about standing up a new pod. What I was surprised about with the delegates, in addition to this, is that of all the solutions we've seen in the past, they kind of like this. Like the response was, Michael Levin is really tough when it comes to Kubernetes space. You can't get much over it. You can't get much over this.
He's on the Kubernetes dev team.
Yes, he is. He is intense. So if you're going to come with any thing related to Kubernetes and you're presenting to him, make sure you know where the value was at. And I was shocked to see that he really didn't poke many holes into the solution. So technically, it sounds like a sound solution. I'm just wondering what is it I'm not seeing, because this is a huge, massive undertaking to do this whole software stack and the hardware stack.
For me, and they touched on it at the start of the presentation, they've gone and got funding in a different way because they knew this wasn't a 5 to 7 year journey. These guys are 12 years in and are just getting product market fit. So the thing that's been fascinating to me is these guys knew it was really hard to completely re-engineer this from the get-go. They knew that it was a complete rethinking of the hardware, the silicon, the BIOS. right through to that control plane and kind of everything in between. So they've taken the long-term, how do we re-architect it? And that to me is really thoughtful. And I think as we now start to put it in front of people, the questions come, and because they've taken 12 years to get here, they've had time to make missteps. They've had time to kind of have it be picked apart. And the thing I've picked up from SoftIron is just the completeness of vision. So keeping us on track here and keeping us moving, it was really interesting to see our next vendor come up off the back of platform
SoftIron
and then Platform 9, because they weren't coming at exactly the same problem, but there was elements of that. So maybe Keith, you know the space maybe better than anybody around the table. How did you see Platform 9, and how would you describe it to the viewers?
So Platform 9 has been around for just over 10 years, I believe. The founding team came out of VMware. There was a product called VMware Labs, which I used and was beloved. The team started Platform 9 as a managed OpenStack solution where you would basically give them you install their agent on VMs, bare metal, and then they stand up an OpenStack instance within your environment, and they manage it. That has now morphed, of course, to Kubernetes. Yep. And they're trying to solve, their latest product announcement, they're trying to solve a problem that has existed in the enterprise since the time that, x86 servers entered the data center. The over-provisioning of resources and the inefficient use of resources. They threw up a slide that was not a surprise, I think, to any of us, because we see that number quite commonly. 30% of the resources in a given data center are used. So efficiency of a data center is roughly about 30%. And that's a pretty common number. Yeah. What they're aiming to do is increase that utilization using software to basically re-provision EC2 instances as needed and right-size those instances based on the need of the application. There was a lot of debate within the delegate class back to Platform 9. Basically, are they trying to solve a people problem with a tool?
Yeah. I mean, the one that stood out for me was you got your application needs 10 gigabytes of space, but minimum you can provision in the instance is 12. That doesn't sound like a very big problem when it's 2 gigabytes on one instance. And I made the comment, I think, you times that by 1,000, you've now over-provisioned 1,000 environments by 20%, and you're paying for that. But going back to your point is that a people problem we're trying to fix, or is that technology problem we're trying to fix?
We've been trying to fix that people problem. We've been trying to fix that problem for a very long time.
Yeah,
and the balance of the developers or the database guys or the storage guys or whatever has always been there. So we've applied new types of technologies to that. On my storage side, it would be thin provisioning. We've done virtualization, and we've been doing this since MVS. So it's not new. It's applying it. If you've got a super smart, platform engineer, you got a super smart delegate like we had around the table, you're going to address it. But we don't have those kind of skills. So now I've got to look at it and look at it another way. So now what they've done is, outside of what they do from a managed servicing, is they brought a tool that you can bring to AWS. I think they plan to bring it to Azure, that you can do saving of the servers and get your money back. I mean, some significant dollars on your money. So
what was your takeaway from those guys, Steve?
Well, I'll just say this, that you're right, of course, that this is what we've been trying to solve in various areas. Yeah. Thin provisioning was actually a pretty successful product category, but not nearly as successful as VMware, which the main slam dunk use case for VMware was this problem.
With server utilization.
And they're doing it
We're back there
for
again.
the cloud. And so I guess you could do worse than attacking the same problem in a different domain with the same solution that led you to be a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of liking it.
Yeah.
That was my takeaway.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's some challenges, I think, around their shared risk, shared reward model from a pricing point of view.
Oh, they'll
I think-
figure that one out.
I think they were trying to maybe, whilst I applaud what they're doing to try and share risk, that's going to be hard to sell to people in procurement. But I think you can knock the edges off that. The core engineering looked solid, and that's a lot harder problem than coming up with a pricing model.
All in all, good session.
So yeah, we've had a fantastic day here at Tech Field Day, Cloud Field Day 19, I think we've had. So check out the content. You can see that streaming on the LinkedIn channels. You can check all of us out on our socials. We'll be posting about those sessions. So we'll see you next time for another episode of Infrastructure Matters. Thank you very much for watching.